Welcome to CPAC Now, America UnCanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp, joined with my wonderful husband, Matt Schlapp. Great to see you.
Good to be with you, sweetheart.
Gosh, it's been such a long couple weeks, but it just never stops here in the swamp. But not only in the swamp, there's so much going on across the country. But we want to tackle some of these serious issues, the vaccine mandate, and we're also going to pay homage to the victims of 9/11 and remember the heroes from 20 years ago.
And tonight we have a real hero from 9/11, Bernard Kerik, former NYPD commissioner. On that very fateful day, he was on duty at Ground Zero when we were attacked on 9/11. But first, we want to dive into this most repugnant of pieces of breaking news coming out of the Biden administration, and that's this idea of mandates, and most specifically this vaccine mandate, which I think has so many of us really upset. And we're honored to be joined by attorney, warrior, somebody who was on the ground in Nevada during and after the election to make sure that we could highlight the fraud, which we're still smarting over. Kurt Schlichter, senior columnist at Town Hall, joins us now. Kurt, thanks for joining us on America UnCanceled.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mercedes. Appreciate you having me.
All right, let's jump right in. You're a lawyer amongst many other things. Give us even the fake explanation as to why President Biden has any legal authority to tell us what we must do with this vaccine.
Well, look, if you ignore the Constitution, you could do anything you want. So that's kind of the way it is. It was that way with the eviction moratorium. Yeah, I know it's against the Constitution. I know I don't have the power to do it, but I'm going to do it and make you go through all the gyrations, and maybe I'll get away with it for a little while. What they're doing with this is they're trying to use an airborne hazard rule for OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety. And it's such a stretch. It's actually quite ridiculous. And they all know it's ridiculous. It's like everything else with the Biden administration, it's theater. He's trying to show that he's very, very hardcore against the vaccine. And since he has zero credibility and he can't get up and tell people, hey, go take the vaccine, it's good for you. And people look at him and go, oh, okay, I trust you. You're a wise and intelligent leader. I will follow your lead. Since that's off the table, what we have is a guy who has to pretend to have power to do stuff. And of course, he doesn't have that power. The Constitution doesn't let him, despite what all the Twitter con law guys say. It's hopefully it will be tossed out fairly expeditiously, though there's kind of a weird way this is going to have to go, because they're doing it under an OSHA regulation instead of just, a typical proclamation.
I have so many questions for you. Just so many questions. Besides the fact that I think the liberals almost hate you as much as they hate us. Let's just start from there. But it's President Biden to me is like the emperor with no clothes, okay? Like, he goes out there.
Oh, there's an image, Mercedes. Thank you.
Well, I don't know what's worse.
Thank you.
With no clothes, Biden with no clothes. It's all bad. It's all bad.
Oh, gosh. Gosh, like your husband, I'm a tough guy. I married a Cuban woman, but, that's too much. That's killed me to the core of my soul.
I can't take you to anywhere, Lord. Okay, so during his speech, and this speech, first of all, it was the most divisive speech I have ever heard. He literally talks to us like we're a bunch of toddlers when he says, we've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. What's your reaction to this almost pointing the finger at, blaming the unvaccinated people, not allowing the unvaccinated people to actually share their concerns about why maybe they themselves are making this personal decision not to get vaccinated?
Well, his patience is wearing thin. What about the rest of us? He doesn't understand the chain of command here. I'm a military guy. I understand chain of command. It doesn't go president, citizen. It goes citizen, president. See, he works for us. He doesn't tell me a damn thing. And as far as my feelings about his proclamation, I'm going to try and keep it FCC compliant so the kids can listen. I don't work for him. He's not my boss. He's not my mom. He's not my master, and he's not my king. He doesn't get a say. I will do what I think is best because I'm an American citizen and I outrank him. Now, the fact that his entire speech was based on the idiotic premise, which he actually said on purpose, we need to protect you vaccinated people from the unvaccinated. Well, I thought the vaccine was supposed to do that. Now, I am very irritated about this, as you can tell. I'm a little bit agitated. Now, I have had the vaccine. Why did I have it? Because I damn well felt like it, and it was right for me based on my own personal choices.
Amen, brother.
But at this point, I almost wish I could be unvaccinated so I could give them a double bird and tell them what to. I am not. I identify as unvaccinated. Kiss my Schumer.
Kurt, you have this all wrong. You don't understand the way this vaccine works. It's so temporary, you basically are unvaccinated again, okay? So just, you're okay.
Okay.
You'll be able to remake a decision. But let me go to something very specific. When they blamed CPAC with one case for being a super spreader and giving Chinese corona to the whole first family and every VIP, I had like handshakes of mine circled in red in some of these publications. I called the experts at these health departments and some of the folks I knew from previous service, and they said, look, if this had been a measles outbreak or something like that, it could have been awfully serious. So like when you see them equating the vaccine for Chinese corona with the vaccine for measles or smallpox or polio, to me though, besides these legal questions about can you force, can you not force, there's a common sense question, which is something that younger people bring up to me all the time. Why would I vaccinate myself if I'm young and healthy and have no underlying health issues? Why would I vaccinate myself from a virus that I have an over 99% chance of not only surviving, but if I get it, it's a bad week of a cold. Isn't that very different from all these other very serious health challenges and viruses and diseases that we have a true inoculations from?
Well, it certainly is, Matt. And take smallpox, for example, which even though it was eradicated from the face of the earth and one of the greatest achievements of medical science in the mid-'70s, I was still inoculated with it when I was in the military in the late. I'm a big believer in vaccines. I'm also a big believer, but when you say I believe in vaccines, I mean that's like saying I believe in cars. Yeah, I believe in cars, but you're not going to catch me driving a Yugo. Everybody has to have their own individual situation. Now, I caught COVID when we were working together fighting for election integrity in Nevada. And later I consulted with various doctors who I trusted and read and learned and looked at my personal situation, which includes the people around me. And I decided I would get the vaccine, that it made sense for me. And of course, I didn't have any problems. I mean, I grew a prehensile tail, but that just means I can have a third beer at once. But then again, I would never presume, and I'm very happy with having the vaccine, except for the fact that I can't tell people to go to hell. I'm not taking it. But I wouldn't presume to tell anyone else because I don't know their situation. And even if I did, I'm not their mommy or daddy. I'm not the colonel of America. I'm just one guy. You've got to decide what's right for you. That's all we're not asking. That's all we're telling. That's what we're going to do. We are not going to stand for this nonsense.
Let's go back to the constitutionality of this, because I think one of the cases they keep referring to is this Jacobson versus Massachusetts, which was back in the early 1900s. I think it was like 1905, which would basically the Supreme Court decided that the states had the power to mandate the vaccines, but the federal government, they did not have the power. Do you believe that's going to be part of, as you're seeing these multiple states go out there and challenge Joe Biden's vaccine mandate, is that going to be part of it as they put their case together?
Well, Well, look, Chase, I think there's a lot wrong with the Jacobson decision's applicability today. First of all, that was smallpox. Smallpox had about a 30% mortality rate. This has less than 1% and much, much less than 1% for the vast majority of people. In J force anybody to take an injection. They said, here, you get the injection, you pay a $5 fine. That's a little different, too. Then there's the state and federal issue. And of course, as we discussed before, where is the federal power that allows Joe Biden to tell people they have to take a specific medicine? Well, it just doesn't exist, even if you put the OSHA regulations on the rack and stretch them till their joints break. It's a bad case, and it's also an evil case in the sense that it's been used for evil. It was one of the cases that was cited in support of the eugenics ruling, and a case name escapes me, but it was a developmentally disabled woman sterilized against her will, and the very, very cruel famous quote from that is 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. When you talk about the slippery slope, if you're sliding down to eugenics, that's a slope you shouldn't be on.
Right.
You should avoid that slope entirely.
Yep.
Yeah, no, for sure, Kurt. I just can't believe where we are as a country and what this administration continues to do. You're out there in California, a place that has embraced socialism, and we've seen the destruction of the American large city first happen in California cities. There's a lot of coverage on Gavin Newsom, who's given them all the policies they've ever voted for, but is not an overly popular governor. What's the state in politics in California? Is it forever lost for a generation? Will it become a separate state? How do we resolve this California question?
California is an uphill battle. When I got to California in 1972, after being kicked out of the Midwest by popular demand, California was a land of opportunity. Reagan was governor. You came to California to make your dreams come true. It never occurred to me that I couldn't do what I want in California. Now, I grew up in the suburbs around San Francisco. I went to college in San Diego before they knew better and put in exacting standards. And when I came back from the Army after Gulf War in 1991, I said, I'm going to Los Angeles because that's where the opportunity is. I mean, it was never an issue. California is a land of opportunity. Well, that's gone for a lot of people. California is now a feudal state. Now, I'm very lucky. I'm a partner in a law firm. I'm a trial lawyer in a blue city. Everyone around me is rich. They drive nice cars. We all have our gardeners working. You can probably hear them. Life is very good in my enclave. You go 5 miles to the east, it's not so nice. Now, the people around here with their, Trader Joe's Screwtop Chardonnay and their copies of Ibram Kendi's books, they're very smug in their own little world. But, it seems to me like France on the edge of the revolution. Everything Biden does is to make people like this, like the ones I live around, prosper at the expense of everybody else. And, from talking to people, because I've been stuck in LA for a while. Get around. I was talking to my friend Selena Zito the other day, and she says, boy, out there, the anger is building. Next year is going to be a tsunami in repudiating these people. This failed establishment, this garbage elite that looks down on regular Americans, that squanders our lives in disasters like the Kabul evacuation, that doesn't care about inflation. It cost me $75 to fill up my tank the other day. $75. Maybe that's probably okay for a lawyer. I mean, I don't like spending $75. But what about a guy who's not a lawyer? What about a guy who's got to feed his family on maybe a job that's not right. America needs to be about Americans, all Americans, not just the ones who are going to the Met, not just the ones you see in Whole Foods, all Americans. And that's exactly the opposite of what we're getting from the Biden administration.
I never see anyone in Whole Foods because I've never been in a Whole Foods. So
Kurt, I do have to ask you. Just,
You have choices.
Matt's not a fancy lawyer like you are, Kurt. So I do have to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
I want to get your reaction. I've got about 30 seconds on AOC. She was at the Met Gala last night. I don't know. I mean, you seem like such a fashionable guy. I don't know if you saw her dress. She was in this long white dress. I actually thought it was like she was going to get married. And on the back of it, it was written "Tax the Rich," and she had a matching bag called it said "Tax the Rich."
And it was in Melania's script, like the coat she wore.
So I want to get your reaction because since you're this rich lawyer, I want to get a sense of what you think AOC's messages to people like you.
AOC's message to me is I'm going to get a tax cut. She wants to give the SALT, the state and local tax exemption. She wants to lift that as part of the bill because people around here have, high state taxes. And she will cut my taxes. And that's, look, hey, I don't mind my taxes being cut. Hey, rock and roll. But the idea that somehow she's out there, fight for the people, fight for the man. Come on, John Henry, union. No, that's just a lie. And then she can wear her stupid dress around and people can go, squee on Twitter. And it's all a lie. It's all a scam. It's all that. Look, if it makes Kurt's life better, it's a bad policy.
It's so interesting to watch how fraudulent these progressives are.
And she wore that dress at an event, at the biggest event for the most exclusive people, where tickets cost $30,000. I guess if you buy a $30,000 ticket to a ridiculously stupid charity event, you don't mind filling up your truck for $75.
My guess is she didn't buy that ticket for $30,000.
My guess is someone should be checking into the ethics of both the dress and the ticket. But that's just my
suggestion. That'll happen.
She was wearing.
Yeah, media will get right on it.
Yeah,
right after they finish their in-depth probe of Hoover Biden.
Well, Kurt Schickler, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you on. You're so entertaining. You're always in trouble. We love it. And we're glad that you're a friend of CPAC. And with that, we are going to be right back. Welcome back to CPAC Now, America UnCanceled. This past weekend, we honored those who passed away on 9/11. It is the 20th anniversary.
Unbelievable.
And Matt, you wrote this incredible op-ed in the Federalist where you reflected on where you were that day and what you have seen happen now 20 years later. We have a very special story on 9/11, so I'm going to let you say it because I think I'd cry if I'd have to talk about it.
Well, I do encourage people to go to the Federalist and pull down the op-ed because I was asked by Ben Dominich to write it because both from a public policy standpoint, we were there from the beginning of the George W. Bush White House. We ran out of the White House on 9/11, and so we've experienced the full experience of this war on terror, and it has. I think it's just tragic, this idea that some Americans are expendable. Some members of the military could be expendable. Some allies are expendable. Like we've crossed a line of decency here that we try to avoid. At all times. I mean, we drove out to the country in Virginia and someone had written on a bed sheet, "Biden, bring our people home." This has really affected people. And why? Well, why? Because you and I can remember just our own experiences, and all of you have your experiences. I had friends who joined the military that day because they want to defend America.
Right.
For us, we ran out of the White House through different doors. We were told to leave in different ways.
And we were dating at the time, so we had just started dating in August, and we had only been together for about a month.
And I think both of us were very focused on our careers. We didn't know if we were going to get married. We were like a lot of political people. It seems weird for probably most of you who are watching, but a lot of political people just decide that they'll be vagabonds, they'll take different political jobs, and that's what they'll focus on. And we had a wonderful courtship, and 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden everybody is scattering, and I couldn't find Mercy. There was an alternate White House where we all assembled in what was the Daimler Chrysler corporate offices in D.C., and Mercy had gone to a different location, ironically with somebody who's on television now,
Right.
but was your boss. And I couldn't find her, and I was really worried about her. And I remember I had to leave that alternate White House to try to figure out where you were. And they said, if you leave, we'll never let you back in, and the city's closed. And I said, remember this face, because I will be back in the face, and I'll be sweaty. And I'm not a fast runner, but I got to find someone and come back. And I did find her. And in the midst of all of that, we didn't have cell phones. So we had pagers, some of us, and some of us had Blackberries. But I had to wait in line at a pay phone at a Marriott hotel. To this day, I couldn't tell you where that Marriott was in the city. I got so kind of turned around with the craziness of the day. And the guy in front of me said, I'm really upset because my brother works in the two towers and one of the towers had collapsed. And I said, I was doing my best to be the coach. I was like, I bet your brother's in that other tower. You can't worry about it. I can just tell you, focus on the positive. And I'm talking to him, and the other tower comes down, and he just breaks, And I finally get my chance to get to the phone. I can't find my mom, but I locate my younger sister, Chrissy, and she says, she doesn't even know you yet. And she says, you go find Mercy, you tell her you love her, and you should probably think about marrying her. And that really kind of, for a guy in his 30s, that really kind of hit me. And I think for a lot of people, we grew up on that day. We thought, this is the way life is going to turn. Maybe it's time to get out about the serious things of life. And maybe your job isn't the most important thing you'll do. Maybe there's other things that are awfully important. And so it's a special day for us, and I know it's a special day for a lot of people.
And I'll never forget, I was very scared, obviously. You had all the jets, flying over D.C. Obviously, the Pentagon was on fire. We went to go pick up the car at the Ellipse at the White House, and you could see the Pentagon up in flames. And I remember the next day, I was like, how are we going to go back in there to the White House? And Matt goes, we are not going to let the terrorist win. We are going to fight the terrorist. We need to be brave for all the Americans out there who are scared. So that was, I think, a very important message that
we drove out of the White House, and Constitution Avenue was vacant except for some tanks.
Yeah.
There was no cars. You could see the smoke coming from the Pentagon when you got to the right angle. And the city was desolate, and it was a scary time. And just so the world knows, we were evacuated the next day too.
Yep.
Because they thought there was something else. And I thought the strangest thing is we get out of the White House, and I'm with Ken Melman, my boss, and I'm a few steps behind, and I see Phil Larson, who's the head of the White House grounds, those 18 acres, and his hand is literally shaking with a cigarette as he's trying to put it to his lips, and he's pointing to the air because he had seen the plane that had hit the Pentagon, and I assume he thought the next plane that was coming was going to hit the White House, and he told us to run, and boy, we did.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we have 5 daughters, and I think it's important for them to know the story. We talk to them about 9/11. I know for many of you who have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, children of your own, to share the story so that they never forget what happened on that dreadful day, that we never forget our first responders, our troops, the bravery, the unity we had as a nation, because that's what matters. And we just need to make sure that we stay strong as a country. And Matt, we had an opportunity to talk to Bernard Kerik. He was the police commissioner at the time in New York City the day of 9/11. He shares his story on what he witnessed that day.
When the first plane hit Tower 1, I was actually in my office. I was just getting ready to start my day. My chief of staff came in and said that a plane had just hit the tower, and I thought it was a small plane. I went to a television in my office, and I could see the damage to the building. And I thought at that point, I'm not sure this is a small plane. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like a small plane. So I called the mayor. I told the mayor I would meet him at 7 World Trade Center. That's the building directly across the street from Tower 1 that had just been hit. That's where our emergency command center was. And I finished getting ready. I got down to the scene within 7 or 8 minutes. And as I tried to get onto the block to get to 7 World Trade, the police were there. They stopped our motorcade and told me that we could not turn onto the block, that people were jumping. And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what they were talking about. So I got out of the vehicle. I walked to the corner of Vesey and Barclay, and over the next 2 or 3 minutes, I probably watched about 24 people jump to their death. I backed the vehicles up West Broadway to Barclay Street, called the mayor, told him where I was. I was in the process of getting a temporary command bus put on that corner so that the mayor, that's where we would station the mayor so he could oversee the rescue. And as I was in the process of calling for that command center, a second jetliner slammed through the north side of Tower 2 above me, showering me and my staff with debris. The mayor arrived about 3 minutes later, and that was the beginning of our day. Over the next 24 hours, we would come to the realization that I lost 23 people that work for me in the NYPD. The Port Authority Police lost 37, including their top senior executives. And the fire department lost 343 members, including their top 3 members of the department, their first deputy commissioner, their chief of department, and their chief of operations, and also the fire department's chief chaplain, who was killed as well. That's something we had to deal with. We had to deal with the families. We had to deal with the aftermath. We had to deal with keeping the city safe. We didn't know how many more planes were coming, if any. We didn't know if the terrorists had ground attacks planned. We shut down the mass transit system. We closed the bridges and tunnels. It's probably the first time in the history of the city of New York that the city was actually closed to incoming traffic completely. And it was a difficult time. But I think the one thing that came out of this that every one of your viewers should know and understand is that on September 11, 2001, the men and women of the New York City Police Department, the Fire Department, and the Port Authority Police Department effected the greatest rescue mission in the history of this country. They took between 20 and 25,000 people out of those buildings in the first hour to an hour and a half. And then they evacuated more than 1 million people out of southern Manhattan into the 4 boroughs and into New Jersey over the next 8 hours. It's a feat that was unheard of, unparalleled, never happened before. And hopefully it never has to happen again. But it demonstrates the courage, the perseverance, the dedication, the heroism that first responders do actually on a daily basis. We live in a time today where first responders are being annihilated by the left-wing radicals, by the Marxist mayors and governors. They're not being supported in their own communities. People are calling for defunding of the police departments, diminishing their power and authority. But you know what? On September 11th, nobody was calling for the diminishment of the NYPD or the defunding. They needed the men and women of the NYPD and the other first responders. And I think that's a lesson that every mayor and every governor in this country should pay attention to. People often ask me what was the worst part of that day for me. And I think the worst part, there were 2 things. One, watching people jump to their death. I had been in law enforcement for 30 years, and that was the first time in my entire career that I ever felt completely helpless, where I couldn't yell up to them and tell them to wait, or we're going to send help, or just hold on, or don't jump, or whatever the case may be. And they jumped, and they died. And, it was a helpless feeling to watch that going on around me. Uh, the second worst part of that day was about 5 or 6 p.m. that night. My first deputy came in to me and he said that we have to go downstairs into the auditorium, and we have the 23 families of the NYPD members that are missing. They're in an auditorium, and you should go down and talk to them now. And I had to walk into that room and tell them that the loved ones were missing and that we were doing everything in our power, to help them, and to find them. Um, that was difficult, and it was difficult for me because some of the people that worked for me that died, I knew, and I wanna focus on one, because his family, as you can imagine, every family that lost a loved one was devastated. But there are two families in the NYPD that actually lost two members of the department. Um, the Langone family and the Vigiano family. They lost a cop and they lost a fireman. In the Vigiano family, I had a detective that worked for me named Joe Vigiano. He was a heroic New York City cop. He had been involved prior in two different gun battles, shot 5 times in these two gun battles, decided to stay on the job, went to one of the most dangerous jobs in the New York City Police Department, the Emergency Service Unit, which is like our SWAT team. And he wound up dying on September 11th. He had 3 young children. One was 3 months old. He had a young son, two other sons that were probably, 7 and 5 or 7 and 4. Today, Joe Vigiano's kids, one is in the United States Coast Guard. One is, and he had two that went to the Marine Corps, and those two are now New York City police officers. And, it's a hell of a family. You had a father that was one of the most heroic and decorated firemen. He had two sons, Joe and John Vigiano, that died that day, a cop and a fireman. And then Joe Vigiano had 3 sons, and all 3 of them serve this country today. That's a hell of a family. Afghanistan, the whole Afghanistan issue right now is pretty personal to me, for a number of reasons, right? The Taliban assisted Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, and Al Qaeda was the ones responsible for the attack. So that's one element, right, of my anger and hatred for the Taliban. But for me, it's also personal because on the evening of October 7th, 2001, I had just left my house and I was on the way to Yankee Stadium to meet Rudy Giuliani, the mayor. We were going to one of the Yankee games. The Yankees had just come back to play. I was on the way and my phone in my car rang. And when I answered that phone, the mayor said to me 2 words: "It's happening." I didn't know what he meant. So I said, "What's happening? What are you talking about?" He said, "Remember when the president was here? He told us that the people that did this would be held accountable. And he told us we would be the first to know when we were going to do this." President Bush, called the mayor Giuliani and told him, "You tell the police commissioner, it's happening tonight." So I had pre-warning that we were going after the people that attacked us. Instead of going to Yankee Stadium, I went to headquarters. I brought in my chief of staff, my first deputy commissioner, my chief of department, and we started securing the city in case there were retaliatory attacks as a result. But to watch Joe Biden surrender the country of Afghanistan to the very people that assisted in attacking New York City in our country is probably the worst thing I've ever witnessed in government since I've been alive. I never thought I would see the day that we would surrender this country to anyone, especially a bunch of people that live on the rocks in Afghanistan. The Taliban is a terror group. They are classified as a terror group. To have the President of the United States, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the President's press secretary on a daily basis tell the American people that that's okay, that we're going to communicate with them and we're going to coordinate with them and we're going to negotiate with them. We're not supposed to negotiate with terrorists. We're not supposed to be communicating with terrorists. Terrorists don't have a diplomatic relationship with governments. All of a sudden, there's this mindset in Washington that we're going to be able to deal and communicate and work with the Taliban. So here's the bottom line. The Taliban despises us. In case nobody noticed, in the aftermath of our surrender, and in the aftermath of Joe Biden leaving $80 billion worth of military equipment there, they had a big parade denouncing the United States. They had a big parade with American flag draped coffins going through the streets of Kabul, basically making fun of the United States. We cowered and we surrendered to a bunch of terrorists. Not a country, not Russia or China or some other world power. We surrendered to a bunch of terrorists, the very people that attacked us. Joe Biden should be impeached for what he did. Joe Biden had no business coming to ground zero. None. He wasn't welcome there. He shouldn't have been there. And he had to come with a bunch of props. He had to come to ground zero with a bunch of props because he knew he would be booed from the time he got there to the time he left. When you take that behavior, that he came with his props, President Obama and President Clinton, in every major Democrat, Chuck Schumer, AOC, Nancy Pelosi, they all came to prop him up. But guess what? New York City despises him.
Bernie Kerik, a great man, a true hero, and someone who has really been a great partner with CPAC. And to conclude this episode, we're going to leave you with some video of that tragic day of 9/11. Just remember, no matter what happens, no matter what your politicians do, no matter what the president does, we can remember the lessons of this day in our hearts. We can teach our kids, as you said, Mercy, and we can tell the stories. Please watch this video.
Take two. Take two and 2, 1. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
I'm just tired. I'm tired.
Keep going, keep going.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just